24 years old. That's how old Maya Rodriguez was when she stepped onto a plane bound for Singapore. Convinced she had finally crossed the line between trying and making it. A fitness influencer with 50,000 followers, living in a cramped Miami apartment, suddenly invited to a luxury retreat that promised everything she'd been chasing for 3 long years: money, exposure, and a shot at the life she had dreamed of. For 3 days, it looked like her dream had come true. Perfect photos, perfect views, perfect meals. Her engagement exploded so fast it felt unreal. And then, she disappeared. No posts, no calls, no trace. Her family reported her missing. The resort refused to comment, and the authorities claimed it was a simple accident almost as fast as the news broke. But the truth? The truth wasn't just suspicious, it was organized. Because when investigators dug deeper, they discovered something the public was never supposed to hear.
Welcome to True Crime Tapes, where we bring you the most gripping, mysterious, and heart-stopping stories from the world of true crime. If you're fascinated by the unknown and want to uncover the secrets that the world tries to hide, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a chilling story. And for those of you already part of our community, welcome back. We're glad to have you with us. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts and theories, because we love hearing from you. True Crime Tapes. The truth is always stranger than fiction.
Maya wasn't the first influencer offered this life-changing opportunity. She was simply the first whose story slipped through the cracks. What follows is a trail of deleted emails, vanishing witnesses, and a retreat with more security than a hotel should ever need. If you think this was an accident, wait until you see what they tried to hide. What really happened to Maya Rodriguez? And who created the perfect trap she walked straight into? Maya Rodriguez grew up in Little Havana, the youngest of 3 daughters born to parents who'd sacrifice everything to give them a better life. Her father worked construction, her mother cleaned houses, and every single dollar went toward making sure their girls had opportunities they never did. Maya wasn't handed anything. She earned it, fought for it, clawed her way toward every small victory. In high school, she was the girl who worked at the mall on weekends, saved her tips, and bought her first camera at 16. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be free. Free from worrying about money, free from watching her parents age faster than they should because work was killing them slowly. Free to actually live instead of just survive. After graduating, while her friends went off to college, Maya took a job at a local gym. Minimum wage, but it came with a free membership. She taught herself everything: proper form, nutrition science, how to edit videos on her phone. Every morning before her shift, she'd film content. Every night after closing, she'd respond to comments, study the algorithm, figure out what worked and what didn't. Her boyfriend, Carlos, was her anchor through all of it. They'd met in community college, back when she'd tried the traditional route before realizing she couldn't afford to keep going. He was studying to be an electrician, working with his uncle's company, dreaming of starting his own business someday. They were the same kind of people, hustlers, believers. The type who understood that nobody was coming to save them, so they'd better save themselves. Carlos never questioned her dream, even when his friends joked about her being an Instagram girl. He saw how hard she worked, the discipline it took, the rejection she faced every single day. When she finally hit 10,000 followers after a year of grinding, he took her to her favorite Cuban restaurant, the one they could barely afford, and told her he was proud of her, not because of the number, but because she'd refused to quit. Maya's parents didn't understand it at first. Her mother kept asking when she'd get a real job, something stable, with benefits. But they couldn't deny that she was making money, not much, but enough to cover her rent, her car payment, her phone bill. She wasn't asking them for help anymore, and that meant something. By the time she turned 24, Maya had built something real: 50,000 followers, small brand deals, sponsored posts that paid a few $100s here and there. She wasn't rich, not even close, but she was independent. She had a community of women who looked up to her, who messaged her saying she'd inspired them to start their own fitness journeys. That mattered to her more than the money ever could. But independence comes with a price. Rent in Miami isn't cheap. Her car needed repairs she couldn't afford. The brands that paid well wanted bigger audiences, more reach, Professional-level content she didn't have the equipment to create. She was stuck in that middle space where you're successful enough to keep going, but not successful enough to actually thrive. And that's when desperation starts whispering in your ear. Then came Bianca Torres, an old acquaintance from high school, someone Maya hadn't thought about in years. Suddenly, Bianca was everywhere on her feed, posting from five-star hotels, wearing designer athleisure, posing with supplements and wellness products that clearly cost more than Maya's entire monthly income. Her follower count had exploded from 15,000 to over 200,000 in just 6 months. Maya reached out, partly curious, partly envious. They messaged back and forth, the usual small talk at first. But then Bianca started dropping hints. She'd connected with an international wellness consortium, a group that specialized in pairing influencers with luxury retreat centers across Asia. The pay was incredible, she said. All-inclusive trips, appearance fees, content ownership. She'd been to Bali, Thailand, and now Singapore. Each trip had changed her life. When Maya asked how to get involved, Bianca said she'd put in a recommendation. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. Official letterhead, professional language, a detailed itinerary. The sender claimed to represent an exclusive wellness network backed by a prominent Singaporean entrepreneur named Vincent Liang, a name that carried weight in international business circles. A quick search showed photos of him at charity galas, shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons at hospital openings. The offer was straightforward: 10 days at a luxury resort, daily content creation, yoga sessions, wellness workshops, $5,000 up front, plus bonuses based on engagement metrics. Flights and accommodations fully covered. They'd even handle her visa paperwork. Maya read it 3 times, waiting for the catch. It seemed too perfect, and in her experience, perfect didn't exist. But Bianca vouched for it, showed her the contracts she'd signed, the payments she'd received. Everything looked legitimate, backed by real companies with real websites and verifiable addresses. Carlos didn't trust it from the beginning. He told her it felt off. Too generous. Too fast. He wanted her to verify everything twice, maybe even hire a lawyer to review the contract. But lawyers cost money they didn't have, and the opportunity had a deadline. If she didn't respond within 72 hours, they'd move on to the next candidate. Maya sat at their tiny kitchen table, staring at that email, feeling the weight of every unpaid bill, every declined brand deal, every month she'd scrape by. $5,000. That would cover 3 months of rent. That would fix her car. That would give her breathing room to actually grow her platform instead of just surviving. She talked to her mother, who told her to pray about it. She talked to her older sister, who told her to be careful but not to let fear stop her from living. She talked to Carlos again, who finally said that if she really wanted to go, he'd support her, but she had to promise to check in every single day. 3 days later, Maya signed the contract. The payment hit her account within hours. The flight confirmation arrived that same night. She had 2 weeks to prepare, to get her content calendar ready, to tell her followers about the amazing opportunity coming their way. When she told her parents, her mother cried. Not from joy, from fear. She had a bad feeling, she said. Something about it didn't sit right in her spirit. But Maya was 24, an adult making her own decisions, and her mother's job wasn't to hold her back. It was to pray for her protection. The night before her flight, Carlos held her longer than usual. He made her promise to call him the second she landed, to send her location every day, to trust her instincts if anything felt wrong. She laughed and told him he was being paranoid, that this was finally her big break, that everything would be fine. She believed that. Right up until the moment she stepped onto that plane, smiling at the camera for one last Instagram story, captioning it with "New adventures ahead," she genuinely believed that her life was about to change for the better. She was right about one thing. Her life was about to change, just not in any way she could have imagined. The moment Maya stepped off the plane in Singapore, she felt it. That electric buzz of knowing you're somewhere important, somewhere that matters. The airport alone looked like something out of a science fiction movie, all gleaming chrome and vertical gardens, efficient and spotless in a way that made Miami feel like a beautiful mess by comparison. A driver was waiting for her at arrivals, holding a sign with her name printed in elegant script. He didn't speak much English, just smiled politely and took her bags, leading her to a black luxury sedan that probably cost more than she'd made in her entire life. The drive to the resort took 90 minutes, winding through the city's glittering skyline before heading into lush, tropical countryside. The resort itself was breathtaking. Perched on a hillside overlooking the ocean, it was the kind of place Maya had only seen in magazines, the kind of place where celebrities went to disappear for a week. Infinity pools that seemed to spill directly into the sea, private villas with floor-to-ceiling windows, staff members who appeared the moment you needed something, silent and efficient as ghosts. Her villa was bigger than her entire apartment back home. A king-sized bed with silk sheets, a bathroom with a soaking tub and a rainfall shower, a balcony with a view that made her chest tight just looking at it. There was a welcome basket waiting for her, filled with organic skincare products, herbal teas, and a handwritten note that read, "Welcome, Maya. We're honored to have you here." She FaceTimed Carlos immediately, walking him through every room, unable to contain her excitement. She posted to her Instagram story, and within minutes the comments flooded in. Her followers were ecstatic, living vicariously through her sudden upgrade in lifestyle. For the first time in years, Maya felt like she'd made the right choice. The first 3 days were perfect. Better than perfect. Every morning began with sunrise yoga on the beach, led by an instructor who moved like water. Breakfast was delivered to her villa, beautifully arranged plates of tropical fruit, fresh juice, pastries that melted on your tongue. Then came content creation sessions, photo shoots by the pool, wellness workshops on mindfulness and nutrition, spa treatments that left her feeling like a completely different person. The other influencers at the retreat were friendly, mostly European and Australian women in their 20s, all with similar follower counts, all glowing with the same disbelief at their good fortune. They ate dinner together, shared tips on lighting and angles, laughed about the surreal nature of getting paid to live like this. Maya's content exploded. Her engagement rates tripled overnight. Brands she'd never dreamed of working with started sliding into her DMs. Her follower count climbed steadily, breaking 60,000, then 70,000. Everything she'd been working toward for 3 years was finally happening. On the 4th day, she met Vincent Liang. He appeared at the resort unannounced, though the staff clearly knew he was coming. Everyone straightened up when he walked in, their smiles becoming more fixed, their movements more careful. He was in his early 40s, impeccably dressed in linen and expensive watches, with a kind of calm confidence that comes from never being told no. He greeted each influencer personally, thanking them for representing his vision of wellness and balance. When he got to Maya, he paused, studying her face like he was memorizing it. He told her he'd been following her content, that he admired her authenticity, that she had something rare in this industry, genuine connection with her audience. It should have felt like a compliment. Instead, it felt like being seen through. But Maya pushed that feeling down, smiled, and thanked him. He asked about her background, her family, her goals. He listened intently when she spoke, nodding at all the right moments, asking follow-up questions that made her feel heard in a way that was almost intoxicating. Before he left, he told her she had real potential, that if she was interested, there might be opportunities to extend her partnership beyond this initial trip. More retreats, perhaps even a role as a brand ambassador for his wellness network. He didn't push, didn't demand an answer. He simply planted the seed and walked away. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the conversation, analyzing his words, wondering if this was really happening to her. Carlos noticed the shift in her voice when they talked, the way she seemed distracted, buzzing with possibility. He asked if everything was okay. She said yes, more than okay. She said she thought this trip might actually change everything. She was right, but not in the way she meant. The extension started subtly. On day 7, her coordinator, a British woman named Sienna who handled all the logistics, mentioned that there'd been such positive feedback on Maya's content that they wanted to add 3 more days to her stay. No pressure, of course, but the additional fee would be another $2,000. Maya's return flight would be rebooted at no cost to her. Maya hesitated. Carlos was expecting her home in 3 days. But $2,000? That was real money. Money that could actually make a difference. She agreed, telling herself it was just 3 more days, that Carlos would understand. He didn't understand. When she called to tell him, his voice went flat, distant. He said it felt like she was choosing this place over him, over them. She got defensive, accused him of not supporting her dreams, of wanting to keep her small. They had their first real fight in months, and when they hung up, the silence between them felt heavier than usual. The gifts started arriving after that, small things at first. A bottle of expensive perfume with a note saying Vincent had noticed she mentioned liking jasmine scents during their conversation. A new yoga mat, top of the line, because hers had looked worn in her photos. A piece of jewelry, simple but elegant, with a card that read, "For someone building something beautiful." Maya posted them, thanking the brand, tagging the resort. Her followers ate it up, but something about receiving them made her uncomfortable, like accepting them meant agreeing to something unspoken. Still, it would have been rude to refuse, right? These were just professional courtesies. This is how business worked at this level. Vincent started appearing more frequently, casual run-ins at breakfast, an invitation to join him for dinner with a group of resort investors. Nothing formal, just conversation. He continued to be respectful, never crossing lines, never making her feel unsafe. But his attention was constant, and with it came opportunities, introductions to people who could elevate her career, mentions in industry publications, doors opening that had been locked before. Maya stopped calling Carlos every day. The time difference made it difficult, she told herself. She was busy, tired, living on a different schedule. When they did talk, the conversations were shorter, more strained. He kept asking when she was coming home. She kept saying soon, just a little longer, just one more opportunity she couldn't pass up. Her mother called, worried. She said Maya sounded different, distant, like she was somewhere far away, even when she was on the phone. Maya brushed it off, said she was just exhausted from all the content creation, that she missed home, but this experience was too important to cut short. By the third week, Maya had stopped thinking of the retreat as temporary. It had become her new normal, the luxury, the attention, the validation. She posted less about fitness and more about lifestyle, gratitude manifesting abundance. Her audience grew, but the comments started to change. People asked if she was okay, if she was coming home, if this was still really her. She didn't have an answer, because somewhere along the way, without noticing exactly when it happened, Maya had stopped being herself. She'd become the version of herself that existed in Vincent Liang's orbit. And once you enter that orbit, leaving becomes harder than you'd think. The control came slowly, wrapped in kindness and opportunity. At first, it was just suggestions. Sienna would mention that Vincent preferred certain types of content, that posts featuring the resort's wellness philosophy performed better with his investor network. Could Maya adjust her captions? Could she focus more on mindfulness and less on fitness? It was framed as guidance, professional advice meant to help her grow. Maya complied because it seemed reasonable. This was a partnership after all. Compromises were expected, but each small adjustment led to another and another until she looked at her feed and barely recognized the voice behind it. Then came the schedule changes. What had started as a loose itinerary became rigid and non-negotiable. Every hour of her day was planned by someone else. Wake-up times, meal times, content sessions, spa appointments, evening events. When she tried to take an afternoon off to explore the city, Sienna gently reminded her that her visa was specifically for the resort partnership and that leaving the property without proper coordination could create legal complications. Maya laughed it off, but something cold settled in her chest. She was in a foreign country, dependent on these people for everything from transportation to documentation. When had that happened? When had she given away that much control? She tried calling Carlos one night, needing to hear his voice, needing something familiar to anchor herself. The call wouldn't connect. She tried again. Same result. She checked her phone and realized her SIM card had been replaced without her knowledge, swapped during a complimentary upgrade the resort had arranged. Her new number worked perfectly for local calls but seemed to have issues with international connections. When she asked Sienna about it, the response was smooth and practiced. Technical difficulties with the carrier. They were working on it. In the meantime, she could use the resort's Wi-Fi to message through apps. But the Wi-Fi was monitored, Maya realized. Her messages took longer to send. Some never delivered at all. She decided to leave. Not dramatically, not with accusations, just quietly. She'd thank them for the opportunity, say she needed to get back home, and book her own flight with the money she'd earned. But when she tried to access her banking app, it wouldn't load. When she tried to use her credit card to book a flight directly, the transaction was declined. Panic started to creep in, but she forced it down. There had to be a logical explanation. She found Sienna and explained the situation, keeping her tone light, friendly, not wanting to seem ungrateful or paranoid. Sienna's response was perfect sympathy. Banking issues weren't uncommon for foreigners in Singapore. She'd help Maya sort it out first thing in the morning. In the meantime, why didn't Maya get some rest? She looked stressed. Maybe a massage? On the house, of course. Maya went back to her villa and locked the door, her hands shaking. She tried to think clearly, to assess the situation without letting fear take over. She wasn't in danger. She was at a luxury resort. People knew where she was. Her family, Carlos, her followers. If something was really wrong, someone would notice. But would they? Her posts were still going up, scheduled content she'd created weeks ago, still feeding the illusion that everything was perfect. Her messages home had become sporadic enough that a few more days of silence wouldn't trigger immediate alarm. And in a foreign country where she didn't speak the language, didn't know the laws, didn't have access to her own money, how much power did she actually have? That night, Maya opened her laptop and started typing. Not a caption, not content, a document, a detailed account of everything that had happened, every strange moment, every red flag she'd ignored. She saved it to her cloud storage under a random file name, something that wouldn't draw attention. Then she recorded a voice memo on her phone, speaking quickly and quietly, explaining where she was, who she was with, and that if anyone was listening to this, it meant something had gone wrong. She didn't know if she was overreacting. Part of her hoped she was being paranoid, that tomorrow morning everything would be resolved and she'd feel foolish for panicking. But a stronger, deeper part of her, the part that had grown up watching her mother's instincts save them from bad situations more than once, knew better. That part of her knew she was in trouble, real trouble, the kind that money and influence could make disappear. The next morning, Maya woke with a plan. She'd be smart about this. She wouldn't confront anyone or cause a scene. She'd play along, smile, create content, be the grateful influencer they expected. But she'd find a way to reach someone outside the resort, someone who could help. At breakfast, Vincent appeared again. He sat across from her, his expression kind, almost fatherly. He said he'd heard she'd been having some difficulties, that transitions could be challenging, especially when success came quickly. He wanted to make sure she felt supported and safe. The word safe hung in the air between them, and Maya understood. It wasn't a promise, it was a question. She could feel safe or she could feel the opposite. The choice he implied was hers. She smiled and told him she was fine, just a little homesick. He nodded, pleased with her answer. Then he mentioned something casually, almost as an afterthought. Her contract had an exclusivity clause. Had she read it carefully? It meant that any content she created during her time here belonged to the Wellness Network. Any public statements about her experience needed to be approved. Breach of that clause could result in significant financial penalties. Maya's blood went cold. She'd signed that contract without reading every line, trusting that it was standard, that Bianca had vetted it. But now she understood. They owned her story. They owned her voice. And if she tried to speak against them, they had legal grounds to destroy her financially. She excused herself, claiming she needed to use the restroom, and walked quickly back to her villa. Her laptop was gone. The document she'd written, the voice memo she'd recorded, everything on her phone's cloud storage had been wiped. They'd accessed her accounts, erased her insurance policy, and left no trace. That's when Maya knew she wasn't leaving unless they let her leave. And right now, they had no intention of doing that. For the next 2 days, Maya played the perfect guest. She smiled for the cameras, participated in every scheduled activity, posted content that glowed with gratitude. Inside, she was screaming, but she'd learned early in life that survival sometimes meant pretending everything was fine. She noticed things she'd missed before, the way staff members watched her, not with friendliness, but with surveillance, the way her villa's door didn't lock from the inside, at least not in any way that couldn't be overridden. The way other influencers who'd been there when she arrived were suddenly gone, replaced by new faces who had no context for how long anyone had been staying. On her 28th day at the resort, something shifted. Sienna informed her with practiced casualness that Vincent was hosting a private dinner that evening. Just a small gathering, very exclusive. Maya's presence was requested, not required, of course. Requested. Maya knew what that meant. She nodded and said she'd be honored to attend. She spent the afternoon trying one last time to reach someone outside. She found a staff member who seemed younger than the others, less guarded. She offered him cash, begged him to let her use his phone for just one call. He looked at her with something like pity, shook his head, and walked away quickly. The dinner was held in a private villa on the resort's highest point, overlooking the entire property and the ocean beyond. It was beautiful in a way that felt sinister, too perfect, too isolated. There were only 6 people present. Vincent, 2 men Maya didn't recognize, but who carried themselves with the same untouchable authority. A woman who was introduced as a legal consultant, and Sienna, and Maya. They ate slowly, discussing business Maya didn't understand, investments and acquisitions and growth projections. Vincent was charming throughout, including her in the conversation, asking her opinion on branding strategies. She answered carefully, aware that every word was a test. After dinner, the others began to leave, one by one, until only Vincent and Maya remained. He poured himself another glass of wine and gestured for her to sit. She did because refusing felt dangerous. He told her he'd been impressed with her work, that she'd exceeded expectations, but he'd also sensed her discomfort, her desire to leave. He understood, he said. Sometimes people needed to be reminded of how good they had it before they could truly appreciate it. Maya's throat went dry. She tried to keep her voice steady, told him she was grateful for everything, but that she really did need to get home. She had obligations, people who were depending on her. Vincent's smile didn't waver. He said that sometimes obligations needed to be renegotiated, that success required sacrifice, that people who left before fulfilling their commitments often found themselves facing consequences they hadn't anticipated. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Maya stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She said she was tired and needed to rest. He didn't stop her, just watched as she walked toward the door. But as she reached for the handle, he spoke again. "Maya," he said softly, "you should know that your friend Bianca didn't actually recommend you. I found you. I chose you, and I don't let go of things I choose." She didn't turn around. She just opened the door and walked out, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Back at her villa, Maya made a decision. She was leaving tonight, with or without permission. She'd walk if she had to, find the main road, flag down a car, get to the embassy. She didn't care about the money, the contract, the consequences. She just needed to get out. She packed quickly, stuffing essentials into a small bag. She waited until midnight, then slipped out of her villa, staying in the shadows, moving toward the resort's exit. The grounds were massive, and she got turned around twice, but she kept going, driven by pure adrenaline. She'd almost made it to the main gate when the lights came on. Bright, blinding floodlights illuminating the entire path. Security guards appeared, not rushing, just walking toward her with calm inevitability. Sienna's voice came from behind her. "Maya, darling, what are you doing? It's dangerous to wander around at night. Let's get you back to your room." Maya spun around, backing away. "I want to leave, right now. I'm done with this contract. Keep the money. I don't care. Just let me go." Sienna's expression remained sympathetic, understanding. "Of course you can leave, but not like this. There are procedures, visa requirements, exit documentation. We'll sort everything out in the morning, I promise." "No!" Maya's voice was shaking. "Now! I'm leaving now." One of the guards stepped forward. He didn't touch her, didn't threaten her. He just stood there, a wall of silent authority. Sienna sighed. Maya, please, you're tired and confused. Let's not make this difficult. Come back to your villa. We'll talk in the morning when you're thinking clearly. Maya looked at the gate, so close but impossibly far. She looked at the guards, at Sienna's practiced concern, at the cameras she could now see mounted everywhere. She was trapped, politely, luxuriously trapped. She went back to her villa. She didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, her phone clutched in her hand, trying desperately to send a message to Carlos, to her mother, to anyone. But nothing went through. At 3:47 a.m., her door opened. She hadn't heard a knock. Vincent walked in like he owned the space, because in every way that mattered, he did. You embarrassed me tonight, he said quietly. After everything I've given you, all the opportunities, the money, the attention, you tried to run like a frightened child. Maya stood, forcing herself to meet his eyes. I want to go home. Home, he repeated like the word was foreign. You don't seem to understand, Maya. This is your home now, until I say otherwise. You can't keep me here. His expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. I can do whatever I want. You signed a contract. You took my money. You built your little career on my investment. You belong to me now. I don't belong to anyone. He moved faster than she expected, crossing the space between them in 2 strides. He didn't hit her. He didn't need to. The threat was in his proximity, in the way he loomed over her, in the absolute certainty that no one was coming to help. You made a mistake coming here, he said softly. An even bigger mistake trying to leave. But I'm a generous man. I'll give you one more chance to remember your place. He left without another word. Maya collapsed onto the floor, shaking uncontrollably. She knew then, with absolute clarity, that she wasn't getting out of this alive, not intact. Maybe not at all. She recorded one final message on her phone, whispering into the camera, her face wet with tears. My name is Maya Rodriguez. I'm being held at a resort in Singapore against my will by a man named Vincent Liang. If you're watching this, if I'm dead or missing, please don't let him get away with it. Please tell Carlos I love him. Tell my mom I'm sorry. Tell everyone the truth. She hid the phone in the lining of her suitcase, the one place she hoped they wouldn't think to look immediately. The next morning, her door opened again. Different guards this time. They told her to come with them. She asked where. They didn't answer. They took her phone. They took her bag. They led her to a car with tinted windows. And then Maya Rodriguez vanished. Her phone's last GPS signal was recorded at 4:23 a.m., moving away from the resort toward the mainland. Then it went dark. For 11 days there was nothing. No activity, no sign of life. Just silence. Before we continue with what happened next, I need to pause for a moment because this is getting harder to tell. If you're still with me, if this story is affecting you the way it's affecting me, I need you to do something. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Let me know that Maya's story is reaching people, that her voice is being heard across borders and continents. Because that's the only power we have against people like Vincent Liang. Numbers, witnesses, proof that the world is paying attention. Now let's talk about what happened when Maya's silence finally broke her family's hearts. Carlos knew something was catastrophically wrong on day 4 of silence. Maya had never, not once in 3 years together, gone more than 24 hours without contacting him. Her mother had been calling him daily, asking if he'd heard anything, her voice climbing higher with each conversation. On day 7, Carlos filed a missing persons report with the Miami Police Department. They were sympathetic but ultimately useless. She was an adult in a foreign country, voluntarily. She'd posted on social media as recently as 3 days ago, according to her scheduled content. There was no evidence of foul play. They advised him to contact the U.S. Embassy in Singapore. He did. The embassy ran into walls. The resort confirmed Maya had been a guest but stated she checked out voluntarily on her scheduled departure date. They provided exit documentation with what appeared to be her signature. They showed security footage of someone matching her description, leaving in a private car. Case closed. Except it wasn't Maya in that footage. Carlos could tell from one blurry frame. The woman's walk was wrong, her posture different, But the embassy officials weren't interested in his gut feeling. They had paperwork that said she'd left safely, and that was enough for them. Maya's mother flew to Singapore on day 9, burning through savings she couldn't afford to spend. She went to the resort and demanded answers. Security escorted her off the property within minutes, politely but firmly. She went to the police, who told her the same thing the embassy had. Her daughter had checked out and left the resort of her own free will. Where she went afterward was her business as an adult. On day 11, a group of hikers found human remains scattered along a trail 20 miles from the resort. Wild animals had disturbed the site. Local authorities were called, and within hours, they'd classified it as a hiking accident. An unidentified tourist, they said, happens sometimes. People underestimate the terrain. It took DNA confirmation to prove what Maya's family already knew in their bones. Their daughter, their girlfriend, their bright light was gone. The official report was sterile and final. Accidental death resulting from a fall during an unauthorized hiking excursion. No foul play suspected. The Singaporean government expressed condolences and arranged for remains to be transported back to the United States. Case closed with barely an investigation. Carlos refused to accept it. Maya hated hiking. She'd never once expressed interest in trails or wilderness. She was a gym girl, a city girl. The idea of her voluntarily going on a solo hike in unfamiliar terrain made no sense. But more than that, he knew her. He knew when she was scared, when she was lying, when something was wrong. And every instinct he had was screaming that this wasn't an accident. He called every journalist he could find, explaining the situation, begging someone to investigate. Most didn't respond. A few wrote sympathetic pieces about a young influencer's tragic death abroad, but stopped short of suggesting anything suspicious. No one wanted to point fingers at a respected businessman without hard evidence. That's when Carlos met Jennifer Wu, a freelance investigative journalist based in Hong Kong who'd spent years covering corruption in Southeast Asian business networks. She'd seen Maya's story in passing, and something about it triggered recognition. She'd heard whispers before, rumors of young women disappearing after connecting with certain luxury wellness networks. Jennifer flew to Miami to meet Carlos in person. She told him what she knew, which wasn't much but was enough to confirm his fears. There were patterns, at least 6 other cases over the past 4 years. Young influencers, all with modest followings, all offered lucrative deals at exclusive resorts, all either vanishing or dying under circumstances ruled accidental by local authorities. The common thread, every single case connected back to businesses in Vincent Liang's network. Not directly, never directly, but through subsidiaries, holding companies, partnerships layered so deep that proving connection would require forensic accounting and international cooperation that no one seemed willing to provide. Jennifer had tried to publish on this before. Every outlet she approached either killed the story or was hit with legal threats from law firms that specialized in protecting wealthy clients. Defamation suits, privacy violations, interference with ongoing investigations that didn't actually exist. The legal warfare was designed not to win in court, but to drain resources and create fear. But Jennifer was done being scared, and Carlos had nothing left to lose. They decided to build the case themselves, piece by piece, until it was too solid to ignore. Carlos quit his job. He cashed out his savings, maxed out his credit cards, and dedicated every waking hour to finding the truth about Maya's death. Jennifer connected him with sources she'd cultivated over years. Former employees of Liang's businesses who left under suspicious circumstances, women who'd attended the retreats and barely escaped, journalists who'd been threatened into silence. What they uncovered was a system, a carefully constructed machine designed to identify, isolate, and exploit young women who fit a specific profile: ambitious, hungry for success, disconnected from strong family support systems, willing to take risks for opportunity. The recruitment process always started with someone like Bianca Torres, pretty girls with sudden wealth, posting about international opportunities, making it look effortless. They were scouts, paid generous finders' fees for every successful referral. Most of them probably didn't know what happened to the women they recommended. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. The money was too good, and it was easy to rationalize that it wasn't their responsibility. Once a target was identified, the offers would come. Always professional, always legitimate looking. The contracts were real, the payments genuine. The resorts existed and were exactly as luxurious as promised. Everything about the initial experience was designed to lower defenses, to make the victim believe this was the opportunity of a lifetime. Then came the isolation. Passport control under the guise of safekeeping. Phone issues blamed on foreign carriers. Schedule management framed as professional guidance. Financial access problems attributed to international banking complications. Each restriction added slowly, wrapped in helpful explanations, until the victim realized too late that they were trapped. For most women, the trap ended with sexual exploitation. Powerful men paid enormous sums for access to these young, beautiful influencers whose lives looked perfect online. The women were coerced into private appearances and exclusive events that were actually prostitution under another name. Some complied out of fear, others were drugged. A few tried to fight back. Those who fought back, those who threatened to expose what was happening, they were the ones who accidentally fell, drowned, or disappeared. Their deaths were always ruled accidental, always closed quickly, always handled by local authorities who either were paid off or understood that questioning certain people's business dealings was career suicide. Maya had fought back. According to a staff member Jennifer finally convinced to talk, anonymously and with great fear, Maya had tried to escape multiple times. She'd attempted to contact the embassy, to reach journalists, to smuggle out evidence. Each attempt had been intercepted. After the fourth try, Vincent Liang had ordered her handled. The staff member didn't know exactly what that meant, but 3 days later, Maya was gone. The official story was she'd checked out early for a spontaneous hiking trip. The reality was that she'd been taken from the resort in the middle of the night, driven to a remote location, and murdered to ensure her silence. Her body had been dumped in a way that suggested animal activity would destroy evidence. The discovery had been staged days later, giving time for decomposition to make cause of death determination difficult. The medical examiner who'd performed the autopsy was known for ruling in favor of accidental deaths. His findings were accepted without question. Carlos and Jennifer compiled everything into a detailed report. Timelines, financial records, testimonies from survivors, patterns connecting multiple deaths. They had phone records showing Maya's communications were blocked. They had contracts revealing exploitative clauses buried in legal language. They had transfer records showing payments made after women disappeared, clearly hush money to families who asked too many questions. They took it to the FBI. The agent they met with looked through the evidence, acknowledged it was compelling, but explained that jurisdiction was complicated. Most of the crimes occurred on foreign soil. Pursuing them would require cooperation from Singaporean authorities who'd already closed the cases. The diplomatic complications alone would take years to navigate. They took it to international news organizations. Some expressed interest but wanted more evidence. First-hand testimonies. Survivors willing to go on record with their names and faces. Most of the women who'd survived were too terrified to speak publicly. They'd signed NDAs, received payouts, and been threatened with legal destruction if they ever spoke out. A few agreed to anonymous interviews but retracted their statements within days, clearly having been pressured or paid off. The story was true, documented and backed by evidence, but it was also untouchable, protected by layers of money, legal intimidation, and international jurisdiction complications. Carlos posted everything online himself. He created a website, uploaded every document, every recording, every piece of evidence he had. He shared it across social media platforms, tagged journalists and activists, begged people to pay attention. Within 48 hours, the website was taken down for terms of service violations. His social media accounts were suspended for harassment. His email was flooded with cease and desist letters from law firms representing Vincent Liang, threatening lawsuits that would leave him homeless and bankrupt. But the information had already spread. People had downloaded the files, shared them across encrypted platforms, translated them into multiple languages. A movement began, small at first, demanding justice for Maya Rodriguez and the other women whose deaths had been dismissed as accidents. Hashtags trended, protests formed outside Singaporean embassies. Pressure built on government officials to reopen investigations. Vincent Liang released a statement through his lawyers, calling the allegations baseless defamation and threatening legal action against anyone spreading false information. But cracks were forming. Former business partners started distancing themselves. Brands cut ties with his wellness network. International travel became complicated as activists tracked his movements and staged demonstrations wherever he appeared. The legal system was slow, bureaucratic, and easily manipulated by wealth. But public opinion, once awakened, was harder to control. And Carlos, broken and grieving, but absolutely relentless, refused to let Maya's story die in a closed case file. He would spend the next 2 years fighting, and eventually, impossibly, the wall would begin to crumble. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a mid-level accountant who'd worked in Vincent Liang's financial operations for 7 years, reached out to Jennifer Wu with an encrypted message. He had access to records that proved payments made specifically to silence families of dead women. He had invoices for falsified documents. He had email chains discussing problem resolution that made clear these deaths weren't accidents but planned eliminations. He wanted immunity in exchange for cooperation. He was terrified, and he should have been. People who crossed Vincent Liang tended to meet unfortunate ends. But his daughter was 16, the same age Maya had been when she started dreaming of a better life. He couldn't look at his own child and pretend he didn't know what his employer was doing to other people's daughters. Jennifer connected him with prosecutors who could offer protection. The accountant, whose name was kept sealed for his safety, provided a roadmap through shell companies, offshore accounts, and money laundering operations that had been hiding Liang's activities for over a decade. With that information, authorities finally had enough to move forward. Not in Singapore, where Liang's influence was strongest, but through international financial crime investigations that could freeze assets across multiple jurisdictions. Money was the pressure point that power truly feared. Within weeks, Liang's accounts were frozen pending investigation into trafficking, fraud, and money laundering. His businesses lost credit lines. Partners fled. The carefully constructed empire began to collapse. But Liang wasn't done fighting. He hired crisis management teams to flood media with counter-narratives. He gave interviews painting himself as a philanthropist being destroyed by internet mob justice. He sued everyone he could identify, bearing them in legal fees and court appearances designed to exhaust their resources. Carlos lost his apartment. He was living out of his car, surviving on donations from Maya's followers who'd created crowdfunding campaigns to support his fight. His health deteriorated from stress and exhaustion, but he showed up to every hearing, every press conference, every opportunity to keep Maya's name in the public consciousness. Jennifer published her investigation piece by piece, releasing new evidence as it was verified, building an undeniable pattern. Other journalists, emboldened by her courage, began investigating adjacent stories. More cases surfaced. More families came forward. The international attention became impossible to ignore. Finally, 18 months after Maya's body was found, Vincent Liang was arrested. Not for murder, not initially, for financial crimes that were easier to prove and harder to defend against. But once he was in custody, witnesses who'd been too afraid to speak began coming forward. The staff member who'd helped facilitate the operation, terrified of being implicated, turned state's evidence. She provided detailed accounts of how women were monitored, controlled, and, in cases where they became problems, disappeared. She described the night Maya was taken, the way Liang had ordered it personally, the cold efficiency with which it had been executed. More evidence emerged. Phone recordings Maya had managed to hide in her cloud storage before it was wiped, recovered by digital forensics experts. Security footage from a traffic camera that showed the car Maya had been taken in, heading toward the location where her body was eventually found. Medical evidence that contradicted the hiking accident story, showing injuries consistent with violent assault rather than a fall. The case went to trial. It was international news, a reckoning with how power and wealth could shield monstrous behavior. Liang's lawyers fought hard, arguing insufficient evidence, claiming coerced testimony, suggesting a conspiracy against a successful businessman by jealous competitors and internet vigilantes. But the evidence was overwhelming. 6 dead women, all connected to his network, financial records proving payoffs, testimonies from survivors detailing systematic exploitation, and Maya's own voice, recorded in terror days before she died, naming him specifically. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they returned, the word guilty echoed through the courtroom on multiple counts: conspiracy to commit human trafficking, fraud, obstruction of justice. The murder charges were harder to prove directly, but prosecutors argued for maximum sentences on the charges that had stuck. Vincent Liang was sentenced to 32 years in prison. His assets were seized, with portions allocated to victim compensation funds. His business empire was dismantled, with several of his associates facing their own criminal charges. It wasn't life without parole. It wasn't perfect justice. Maya was still dead, but it was accountability. Finally, after 2 years of being told nothing could be done, that he was too powerful to touch, that wealthy men didn't face consequences, he was behind bars. In the courtroom, when the sentence was read, Carlos wept. Not from relief or satisfaction, but from exhaustion. From the weight of everything he'd carried for 2 years. The fight that had consumed his entire life. Finally reaching something that resembled an ending. Outside, reporters asked if he felt justice had been served. He looked directly into the cameras and said, "Justice would be Maya coming home. This is just the bare minimum of accountability, but it's more than we had yesterday, and I'll take it." Maya Rodriguez's body was returned to Miami for burial. Her family held a funeral that overflowed with people she'd never met, strangers who'd followed her story, who'd watched her light snuffed out by greed and evil, who needed to bear witness to what had been stolen from the world. Carlos stood at her grave and read from the journal she'd kept during high school, back before influencer culture existed, when she was just a girl with dreams. She'd written, "I want to matter. I want to build something that proves I was here, that I made a difference. I want to be remembered for trying, even if I fail." She'd mattered. God, she'd mattered more than she ever knew. Not because of her follower count or her aesthetic or her perfectly curated feed, but because her death had ripped open a conversation about how young women were being exploited, how systems of power protected predators, how wealth could buy silence but not indefinitely. Her story sparked legislation. The Maya Rodriguez Act, introduced in Congress, required social media platforms to verify international business partnerships before allowing recruitment advertising. It mandated reporting requirements for agencies working with influencers abroad. It created funding for investigations into trafficking operations, disguised as legitimate businesses. It wouldn't save Maya, but it might save the next girl who received an email that seemed too good to be true. It might make someone pause, research deeper, ask harder questions before stepping on a plane into someone else's trap. Carlos started a foundation in her name, providing resources and legal support for families of people who disappeared abroad. He worked with Jennifer Wu to train journalists on investigating these cases, on recognizing patterns, on not accepting official explanations when the evidence didn't support them. He never fully recovered. How could he? The woman he'd planned to marry, who'd promised to come home after just 1 week, was buried in the ground while the man responsible sat in a cell that was still too comfortable, still too kind for what he'd done. But Carlos learned to carry it. The grief, the rage, the unanswered questions about Maya's final moments. He carried it forward, used it as fuel to protect others, to ensure her name meant something beyond a cautionary tale. Because here's what they don't tell you about true crime. It's not entertainment. It's not a puzzle to solve or a story with a satisfying ending. It's real people whose lives were cut short by human evil. It's families left behind with holes that never heal. It's a world that will keep producing Vincent Liangs as long as money and power can buy silence. Maya Rodriguez was 24 years old. She was funny, hardworking, loyal, and kind. She believed in herself when no one else did. She fought for her dreams with everything she had, and she was murdered because she said no to a man who'd never been told no in his entire privileged, monstrous life. Remember her name, share her story, and if you take nothing else from this, take this. When something seems too good to be true, when someone offers you everything you've ever wanted with no clear explanation of why, listen to that voice in your gut that says something's wrong. Your life might depend on it. If this story affected you, if you made it this far, I need you to do something for me, for Maya, for every young woman whose story ended before it should have. Subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications, share this video, because the only way we fight back against people like Vincent Liang is by refusing to be silent, by refusing to let victims be forgotten, by making so much noise that power can't drown us out. This is Dark Truth Investigations. We tell the stories that others won't. We honor the victims that systems tried to erase, and we won't stop, not ever, because silence is complicity, and these stories deserve to be heard. Thank you for bearing witness to Maya's truth. May she rest in power, and may we never forget what was stolen from her.